On Wednesday night, 20 rockets were fired from Syria at the Golan Heights by, according to Israel, Iran's Quds Force, a special forces unit of the Revolutionary Guard. Some got through Israel's advanced missile defense shield, but there were no injuries. Israel responded by launching 70 missiles, killing at least 23 fighters, including 5 Syrian troops and 18 allied militiamen. The Israeli Defense Minister, Avigdor Lieberman, said that the IDF had destroyed nearly all of Iran's military infrastructure in Syria. The Iranian attack had been expected. For days now, the Israeli media has been full of reports of people on the Golan cleaning out their shelters. On April 9, Israel reportedly attacked the T-4 Syrian Air Force base near Homs. 7 members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, who had apparently been establishing an airbase, complete with anti-aircraft batteries, were killed. Last week, Israel reportedly bombed a major cache of Iranian missiles north of Hama, in Syria. Everyone knows Israel has conducted over 100 such attacks, the veteran Syrian analyst Charles Glass told me in a telephone conversation from London. Iran threatened retaliation, which came last night. The attacks and counterattacks came just a couple of days after President Trump's announcement, on Tuesday, that the United States was withdrawing from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal. The stories are often reported separately, but they should not be. The withdrawal is a part of a larger story, possibly a larger strategy, which began with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's surprise presentation at the Defense Ministry, in Tel Aviv, on April 30. Its purpose was ostensibly to persuade the Trump administration to confront a long-term nuclear threat to Israel. Its more plausible purpose was to prompt Trump to confront an immediate conventional threat. After Trump's announcement, Israel attacked Kiswa, south of Damascus, again, an act designed to thwart Iran from firing rockets from Syria at northern Israel. 8 Iranians were reported to be among the 15 killed. Netanyahu, at his press conference, claimed to expose something that the world has never seen before. Iranian documents, 55,000 pages, another 55,000 files on 183 CDs, secured by Israeli intelligence. The cache showed that Iran had operated a secret nuclear weapons program from 1999 to 2003, the so-called Project Ahmad. The JCPOA, Netanyahu said, presumed that Iran would come clean about its past nuclear program, but, he claimed, after signing the deal, in 2015, Iran intensified its efforts to hide its secret nuclear files. The inference was clear: Iran lied, big time. The regime hid its nuclear files, cataloging its nuclear knowledge, because it intended to use them at a later date. On Tuesday, as if on cue, Trump mirrored Netanyahu's concern. At the heart of the Iran deal was a giant fiction, that a murderous regime desired only a peaceful nuclear energy program, Trump said. Netanyahu, to seal his claim, provided video clips of Iranian leaders over the years. In one, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei said, "The Islamic Republic has never been after nuclear weapons." President Hassan Rouhani maintained that nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction have no place in Iran's security and defense doctrine, and contradict our fundamental religious and ethical convictions. Another leader claimed that the source of any idea that we are building a nuclear weapon is specious. We are building a research facility for the purpose of industry, agriculture, medicine, and science, peaceful purposes only. Actually, that last statement was from Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, responding, in December 1960, to reports that had reached President-elect John Kennedy, a known opponent of nuclear proliferation, that Israel was working on a bomb at its reactor in Dimona. For Israelis, word of covert Iranian work on nuclear weapons could hardly have been shocking. Indeed, Netanyahu's big reveal was something that the signatories to the JCPOA took for granted. That's why it was negotiated. Netanyahu was showing that Iran could not be trusted, but the deal, as Susan Rice wrote in The Times, was never about trust. It was designed to allow the International Atomic Energy Agency to monitor the very sites that Netanyahu's show and tell focused on. The IAEA has certified Iranian compliance as recently as March. Israeli analysts, including Amos Yadlin, the head of the Institute of National Security Studies, said that Netanyahu had not produced anything like proof that Iran was in violation of its commitments. There is no definitive smoking gun that Iran lied since 2015, Yadlin told Channel 13. What Netanyahu did justifiably call attention to, though, again, it was nothing new, was Iran's ballistic missile program, which the JCPOA did not address. A rough consensus has emerged among leading security experts that the missile program and other matters, such as Iran's support for a Houthi insurgency in Yemen, might well be confronted with new sanctions, which could have been imposed with a JCPOA in place. Without the United States, the international coalition that negotiated the deal loses its major player, and Iran loses its major incentive to allow monitoring. If the U.S. imposes sanctions on its own, these will inhibit Western and Chinese companies aiming to invest there, heightening tensions with allies as well as with Iran. And, if Iran were accused of renewed nuclear advance by, say, Israeli intelligence sources, the only option left to the U.S. would be, if not a military one, at least a renewed posture of brinkmanship. Who other than the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, who brags that he does not do carrots, and has advocated regime change in Iran, would wish to adopt a posture of military intimidation? The point is that this posture is precisely what Netanyahu is counting on, given the potential for escalation in Syria and Lebanon, which he does not wish Israel to face alone. Russia is determined to keep Assad in power, promising to supply his regime with advanced and lethal S-300 anti-aircraft missiles to protect against further air and cruise missile attacks. The Russians are coordinating with Iran, which has also armed Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah is reputed to have 140,000 missiles, an increasing number with guidance systems, capable of reaching virtually all parts of Israel, though not nearly that many launchers, a high-level Israeli official assured me. The Iranian government is still demonizing the West, testing ballistic missiles, supporting Shia insurgents in Yemen, funneling aid to Hamas in Gaza, and welcoming the prospect of the destruction of the Zionist regime. The Netanyahu government, for its part, it is both anticipating a crisis and helping to precipitate one. On April 26, Avigdor Lieberman told the London-based Saudi newspaper Elf that Israel did not want war, but, if the Islamic regime attacks Tel Aviv, Israel will strike Tehran and destroy every Iranian military site that threatens Israel in Syria, whatever the price. Lieberman has also insisted that Israel will maintain freedom of operations in Syria and respond forcefully to any party there with the capacity to launch missiles or to attack Israel or even our aircraft. Not coincidentally, Trump's abandonment of the nuclear deal means that the U.S. will have to prepare detailed contingency plans for an attack on Iran's nuclear sites, which are spread throughout the country. Meanwhile, the U.S. has been backing Israel's preemptive actions in Syria and southern Lebanon. For Israel, then, the goal may be deterrence, but the danger is an escalation that gets out of control, because deterrence means ever more elevated threat. Yadlin told me that the situation urgently needs Russian and American leaders who will contain the menace of a larger war. But Trump's announcement seems unlikely to bring restraint. Ari Sagi, another former military intelligence chief, told me that Netanyahu's performance was calculated to force Trump to exit the nuclear agreement and leave only military power as leverage over Iranian behavior. Presumably, the Iranians, the Syrians, the Russians, and Hezbollah would have to think that any missile attack on Israel would be met not only by the Israeli Air Force but also with American cruise missiles. The former Mossad chief Ephraim Halevi, who normally preaches restraint, told Israel's Channel 10 that Russia got Syria to establish itself and will stay the course. It will not accept the defeat of Iran, its regional partner. Israel will not seek a confrontation with Russia, but if, he said, God forbid, confrontation is unavoidable, Israel will have to come out with the upper hand. He might have added that Israel could never count on having the upper hand without American help. Indeed, Trump's now overt support for a military threat may encourage Netanyahu and Lieberman to see preemption as the preferred course. With the Iranian currency in free fall, the rial lost half its value against the dollar from a year ago, and the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, openly backing the hardline, Netanyahu may feel that he has an American green light for a high-stakes gamble, a conventional air war, already unofficially underway. Netanyahu may hope for a limited war, with no ground invasion, in which Syria and Hezbollah are Russia is satisfied that Assad remains in place, and Iranian leaders, knowing that the cards are stacked against them, dismantle their forces in Syria. Yadlin also made clear to me that Israeli air power could devastate Lebanese and Hezbollah infrastructure in a few days. But Iranian leaders must also know that the same technological asymmetry that encourages Israeli leaders to suppose they can decisively win a war of airplanes, drones, and missiles also makes the Israeli economy far more vulnerable than that of Lebanon or Syria, should war be protracted. Attack Beirut's airport for a month and Hezbollah is hardly affected. Attack Ben Gurion airport for a month and the startup nation shuts down. Nor have the corruption investigations of Netanyahu inspired confidence. If the conflict escalates, it is hard to see how it ends. Shaul Arieli, who commanded a brigade in Gaza in the 90s, and has since written widely on security strategy, told me, given the investigations against him, Netanyahu will not have the moral authority to lead the IDF into a long, bloody conflict. You don't distrust a leader on most things and then trust him on this. Sagi believes that Netanyahu is inherently timid and will want to keep the war on a low flame. The question is whether the logic of the situation will permit caution, whether Netanyahu will be able to exercise caution if he knows that he cannot endure, either strategically or politically, a long war of attrition. In Guns of August, Barbara Tuchman chronicled the structure of escalation, how competing regional powers, under what they perceive as urgent threat, might be backed by competing great powers, whose interests may be much less urgent, but whose leaders are furnished with strategic preparations, hubris, and the fear that military restraint will be perceived as weakness. A constant of any era, she wrote, is the disposition of everyone on all sides not to prepare for the harder alternative, not to act upon what they suspected to be true. Netanyahu, the son of a historian, has always seemed to suppose that preparations for the harder alternative are military. Trump appears committed to the plan. Tuchman, I suspect, would see a failure of imagination.